I've got my image and I like the way it looks. It's straight. It's a good landscape photo, but there's, I don't know how I want to edit it really yet. So I'm going to mess around with a couple of options first. And to do that, I'm going to make a couple of virtual copies. So there's one, there's two, and I like to make a virtual copy of the original file just so I have no edits and it's just the raw image by itself. Bring down the lights a little bit. I use this one, but warm it up a little. A good thing that I like to keep in mind is that you should never have to re-replicate light. So for example, this shot wasn't pointing directly into the light. So if I try to make it too warm, it would look fabricated. And if I made it too cold, it would look purple. It's all about having a good balance in the middle. And then I'll make one more, maybe a black and white. And I'm just gonna tweak with these just to see what I get. I usually like to give myself options and then pick from there, like which is the one that I'm gonna go with. I don't always do this, but for select shots that I have trouble editing with, I do this and it usually gets me out of any kind of editing rut. I normally don't like editing black and white. It should be used only for really specific images, and I don't feel like this is a good representation really. This one's a little bit more gloomier. Maybe take some saturation out. Quite like this one. Yep. So I'm gonna not even mess with this one because I normally go with my gut first, and from here I'm just gonna tweak, like always, just really minute details. I don't see anything crazy in the highlights. There's like some wispy kind of clouds out there, so I might push the highlights a little bit just to mute those. And then as far as the shadows go, I kind of like already where the levels are. This photo is shot with the sun at my back, so it's already, the shadows are extremely dramatic, and I don't want to add too much to it for the sake of it being inauthentic to the shot, similar to how this crazy temperature wouldn't look right to the shot. It's not appropriate. I might warm it up just a smidge, leave it at that. And I like the way the colors are represented here. I specifically like the orange. I do like the blue in here, but it's a little much, so I took the saturation down on that. And if anything, I might put a little bit of purple in there. Once again, I'm just going to go down to the grain, just take it all out for the first little bit of this editing. I might put it out a little bit more towards the end, but at least starting up front, that's too much grain. I don't want to have to look at it. I'm going to bring up the fade on my tone curve. If you notice, I have 5 points set up pretty evenly. Basically what these do is from your blacks to your shadows, and then from your midtones to your highlights and your whites. So this is basically just a linear point of this right here. So highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. This basically controls the same thing, but it just gives you a little bit more 3D control rather than just moving a slider. You can actually strategically move where you want your light to be focused at. And I don't want too much crushing in the blacks because it's, like the lower half of this image is pretty dark. Let's see, so I'm gonna leave that. I am gonna mess with the shadows though. Lately I've been kind of going for the red orange kind of mood, so I might play with the shadows a bit. Let's see, I'll normally adjust based on like a scale, so I want my shadows and blacks to be in the same place sometimes. Same thing for the highlights and whites. I don't want these to be too far apart from each other because then it starts getting out of control. Normally I'll have my shadows a little bit lower than blacks and then highlights a little bit higher than whites. Once again, it's different for everybody, so use what's appropriate. And I'm gonna mess with the vibrance a tad. I might mess with the vignette. Let's see what we get. Yeah, it's a little too dramatic. I want to leave it more flat. Go to the darkest point of the image and I adjust appropriately to make sure it's not overkill. So it, from looking at this image here, you can clearly see that the darkest parts of the image are down here towards the bottom. So I'm going to go to wherever this car is right here, and I'm just going to mess with the grain, and I'm just going to look at how it affects that lower part of the image. I'm going to leave it at 25. Zoom back out, and I'm going to look at the brightest part of my image, which for this, it seems to be right in the middle, which is just the backboard. It looks like that's a reasonable amount of grain. It's not too much, but it still gives like that vintage, old school, kind of do the right thing vibe. Straighten this out maybe a tad. And yeah, that's about it. I like to count all the windows and just see how many people are living in there. It's a cool little exercise to do just to give you a sense of scale of how big New York City really is, and makes you appreciate it more, really, especially if you're a photographer. You definitely have to respect the sense of scale that you get from shots like this and from scenes like this.
The world would not be the same.